I do my scene, and it's a soliloquy. It's just like a monologue. I come in blasting. I have my lines down. I came in firing.
He made America laugh with a single catchphrase, becoming one of the most recognizable sitcom stars of the 1970s. But behind the smile and booming success, Jimmie Walker was hiding a truth few people ever suspected. For decades, the real story stayed buried beneath fame, rumors, and assumptions. Now, his biggest secret is finally coming to light. And it's guaranteed to shock you. We all know that from a young age, Jimmie Walker exhibited a natural athleticism and physical energy that set him apart. Sports became both a passion and an outlet, a way to channel the vitality that the streets demanded of boys in his neighborhood. Baseball, basketball, and even informal street games were more than recreation. They were small escapes from the pressures of daily life. To help support himself and contribute to his family, Walker took on a variety of odd jobs. One of his more notable early experiences was working as a vendor at Yankee Stadium during the legendary 1964 World Series, a job that, while physically demanding, exposed him to a world beyond his immediate surroundings and planted seeds of ambition and perseverance. These early work experiences taught him the value of hard labor, responsibility, and a relentless drive to succeed despite limited circumstances. However, school life did not come easily to young Jimmie. He struggled academically in an education system that often failed to accommodate students from underprivileged backgrounds. The combination of personal challenges and the pressures of his environment led him to drop out of school temporarily. This decision, though common among youth in his neighborhood facing similar obstacles, risked closing off many of the avenues he would later pursue. Yet Walker's story is not defined by failure, but by his capacity for determination and reinvention. Recognizing the need to improve his prospects and refusing to be confined by the limitations around him, he eventually returned to education through night classes at Theodore Roosevelt High School. These classes were part of a federally funded SEEK program designed to provide opportunities for students who had struggled in traditional educational settings. Through SEEK, Walker found a supportive environment that encouraged him to rebuild his academic foundation while accommodating his personal circumstances. This program was pivotal, not only in improving his educational standing, but also in instilling in him the confidence to pursue goals that had once seemed out of reach. After navigating the challenges of his youth in the South Bronx, Jimmie Walker Jr. began charting a new path in the late 1960s, a period that would prove pivotal in shaping both his career and his public persona. Though he had not initially envisioned a life in entertainment, Walker's innate charisma, quick wit, and natural ease with words guided him toward comedy, a field where he could combine his street-smart humor with the communication skills he had been honing since adolescence. Upon completing his formal education through the SEEK program at Theodore Roosevelt High School, Walker pursued training in radio engineering. This decision reflected a practical approach. He sought a stable career while simultaneously cultivating skills that would prove unexpectedly valuable in entertainment. Working at small radio stations allowed him to develop not only technical expertise, but also the ability to connect with an audience through voice, timing, and presence. The experience of speaking over a microphone, crafting a tone that could engage listeners without visual cues, helped sharpen his comedic instincts and his understanding of rhythm in communication. These early years in radio, often behind the scenes, provided him with a unique foundation. He learned how to command attention, improvise, and deliver content in a way that resonated with an audience. All skills that would become essential when he stepped onto a live stage. In 1967, Walker made his stand-up debut, opening for The Last Poets at a venue in Harlem. This first foray into live comedy was both exhilarating and formative. The Last Poets, known for their politically charged spoken-word performances and socially conscious themes, drew audiences attuned to rhythm, wordplay, and social commentary, elements that would influence Walker's own comedic style. Facing a live audience for the first time, Walker discovered the immediacy of performance. The way laughter built momentum, how timing could turn a small joke into a memorable moment, and how personal experience could be transformed into humor. Each performance tested his confidence, honed his delivery, and taught him the importance of reading and responding to a crowd in real time. Over the next few years, Walker dedicated himself to building his act, performing in clubs across New York and gradually expanding his reach. Small venues and local comedy clubs became laboratories for his craft, where he experimented with material, refined his timing, and developed the persona that audiences would come to recognize. His humor often drew from his own life experiences, the struggles of growing up in a tough neighborhood, the absurdities of everyday interactions, and the contradictions of urban life, allowing him to connect deeply with audiences who saw themselves reflected in his observations. These formative performances were not just about getting laughs. They were exercises in discipline, resilience, and self-definition. The late-night sets, the grueling travel between clubs, and the pressure to succeed in a competitive environment all contributed to shaping Walker's professionalism and work ethic. Walker's persistence and growing reputation eventually caught the attention of television producers. His first national exposure came through appearances on high-profile variety shows, including Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In and The Jack Paar Show. These programs, known for showcasing rising comedic talent, provided Walker with a platform to reach a broader audience and to demonstrate his versatility as a performer. On these shows, he displayed his sharp timing, infectious energy, and ability to command attention, even in short segments. Casting directors and producers began to notice the charisma he exuded on camera, an effortless combination of humor, charm, and relatability that made him stand out in a crowded field. In 1974, Jimmie Walker Jr. received the opportunity that would define his career. He was cast as James J.J. Evans Jr. on the groundbreaking CBS sitcom Good Times. At 26 years old, Walker was tasked with portraying a teenage son in a family struggling to make ends meet in Chicago's public housing projects, a role that required both comedic timing and emotional authenticity. Despite the age gap, Walker brought a youthful exuberance, charisma, and physical energy to the character that made J.J. believable, if heightened, in his antics and emotional reactions. His performance was not just a portrayal of a young black man. It was a synthesis of his own life experience, streetwise humor, and innate theatricality, all of which resonated strongly with audiences across the United States. Walker's J.J. Evans quickly became the standout character on Good Times, largely due to his infectious charm and comedic brilliance. His signature catchphrase, "Dean O'Might," became a cultural phenomenon almost immediately, echoing across television, radio, and popular culture throughout the 1970s. The phrase encapsulated J.J.'s exuberant personality and, in many ways, Walker's own natural flair for showmanship. It was a single expression, yet it captured the energy, optimism, and occasional mischief that defined both the character and Walker's performance style. Merchandise, promotional appearances, and talk show segments amplified the catchphrase, transforming Walker into a household name almost overnight. The acclaim was swift and substantial. Walker earned 2 Golden Globe nominations for Best Supporting Actor, validating his talent beyond his popularity as a comedic presence. The accolades reflected his ability to balance humor with humanity, portraying J.J. not merely as a clownish figure, but as a nuanced character navigating the challenges of adolescence, family expectations, and socioeconomic hardship. While the sitcom itself addressed issues of poverty, racial inequality, and family struggle, it was Walker's performance that often drew the most attention. His physical comedy, exuberant facial expressions, and rhythmic delivery of jokes made him the centerpiece of many episodes, a fact that both elevated the show's visibility and complicated its broader cultural mission. Culturally, Good Times was a milestone in television history. It was one of the first mainstream sitcoms to center on an African-American family, portraying the Evans family with a mix of realism, humor, and social consciousness. Themes of economic hardship, systemic inequality, and familial resilience were woven into the narrative, offering viewers both laughter and reflection. Walker's JJ, however, began to overshadow these themes. While audiences adored the high-energy antics and comic timing he brought to the role, critics and creators noted that the focus on JJ's comedic escapades sometimes diluted the show's original intent. Episodes increasingly highlighted JJ's personality and catchphrase-driven humor, occasionally at the expense of exploring deeper social or familial issues. This tension between commercial appeal and artistic purpose became a hallmark of Walker's tenure on the show. Walker's rise to stardom was meteoric but came with both advantages and challenges. On the one hand, he became a symbol of black comedic talent in mainstream media, demonstrating that an African-American actor could command national attention and inspire widespread adoration. His visibility opened doors for guest appearances, commercials, and interviews, solidifying his presence as a cultural figure beyond the confines of the sitcom. On the other hand, the intensity of his fame and the association with a single, highly recognizable character created pressures that would influence his career trajectory in subsequent years. Being so closely identified with J.J. Evans meant that both audiences and industry professionals struggled to see Walker beyond the exuberant teenager and his trademark exclamation. While Jimmie Walker's portrayal of James J.J. Evans Jr. on Good Times brought him nationwide fame and made him a cultural icon, his rapid rise was not without significant controversy behind the scenes. What audiences saw as a joyous, high-energy sitcom often masked a complex web of creative disagreements and personal tensions among the cast and production team. As Walker's star power grew, the balance that the show's creators had originally intended, focusing on the Evans family as a realistic depiction of African-American life in the projects, began to shift. Walker's comedic charisma, infectious charm, and signature catchphrase, "Dynamite," became central to the show's identity, drawing attention away from the family-oriented storylines and, at times, sidelining the serious social themes the show initially sought to explore. The tensions were most pronounced with Walker's on-screen parents, John Amos and Esther Rolle. Amos, who played the stern and principled James Evans Sr., and Rolle, portraying the strong, nurturing matriarch Florida Evans, were deeply committed to presenting a portrayal of African-American family life that combined humor with authenticity. They viewed Good Times not merely as a sitcom, but as a vehicle to address real-life challenges such as poverty, systemic racism, and family dynamics. As Walker's popularity surged, however, Amos and Rolle became increasingly concerned that the show's focus had shifted disproportionately toward JJ's antics and catchphrase-driven humor. They worried that the original intent of portraying a grounded, multidimensional family was being overshadowed by what they perceived as an emphasis on slapstick and exaggerated comic relief. The conflict escalated publicly. Both Amos and Rolle spoke openly about their frustrations with the show's creative direction. Rolle, in particular, took a strong stand, at one point leaving the series temporarily in protest. Her departure was a dramatic manifestation of the underlying tensions and served as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between commercial appeal and artistic integrity in television production. Rolle's absence highlighted not only her personal convictions, but also the broader challenges of producing socially conscious entertainment within a commercial framework that increasingly prioritized ratings and audience laughter over narrative depth. Walker himself, though generally professional, was caught in the middle of these disputes. His meteoric rise and the overwhelming popularity of JJ made him a lightning rod for both adulation and criticism. While his performance was widely celebrated, it inadvertently contributed to the very issues that Amos and Rolle protested. Walker's comic timing, exuberant persona, and the sheer visibility of his character created a tension between his natural success and the collective goals of the cast. Behind the scenes, this sometimes led to strained relationships, differing opinions on episode direction, and challenging negotiations about storylines and character focus. These creative disagreements were compounded by the pressures of television production in the 1970s. Ratings were paramount. Network executives closely monitored audience reactions, and the success of J.J. Evans meant that episodes highlighting Walker's character often received favorable attention from producers and viewers alike. This created an environment where artistic priorities were in conflict with commercial incentives. The very elements that made Walker a breakout star, the energy, charisma, and comedic flair, were the same elements that fueled disputes over the show's mission. Despite the tension, the show continued to air and remain popular, a testament to the strength of both Walker's performance and the ensemble cast. The behind-the-scenes conflicts, however, left an enduring mark on the series' legacy. They illustrate the complex dynamics of fame, where a single actor's success can both elevate a project and disrupt the collaborative vision. Walker's tenure on Good Times thus becomes a case study in the intersection of talent, celebrity, and creative control, a period where the very qualities that made him beloved by millions also sparked debate about the direction and purpose of the show. In 1975, Walker appeared in Let's Do It Again, a comedy directed by Sidney Poitier and co-starring Bill Cosby and Poitier himself. The film, part of the popular trend of African-American-led comedies during the 1970s, provided Walker with an opportunity to reach movie audiences while aligning himself with respected actors who had already achieved both critical and commercial success. His role, though supporting, allowed him to showcase the energetic, high-spirited persona that had made J.J. Evans a household name. It also demonstrated his capacity to translate television comedic timing to the more expansive format of film, navigating dialogue, physical comedy, and ensemble dynamics on a larger canvas. Following this, Walker continued to seek film opportunities that could capitalize on his comedic flair. In 1979, he appeared in The Concorde, Airport 79, part of the popular disaster film series. While the movie leaned heavily on spectacle and dramatic tension rather than character-driven humor, Walker's participation highlighted his versatility and willingness to take on diverse projects, even those outside the realm of pure comedy. His presence brought a familiar energy to audiences who had come to love his work on television, bridging the gap between his established persona and new cinematic ventures. Perhaps the most widely remembered film appearance of this period was Airplane, 1980, a landmark parody that has since become a staple of comedy cinema. Though Walker's role was relatively small, the film's innovative humor and rapid-fire comedic style aligned well with his skill set, allowing him to engage with a broader comedy audience and demonstrate that his talents could extend beyond the sitcom format. Airplane was emblematic of the era's trend toward absurdist, high-concept comedy, and Walker's participation positioned him within a larger comedic tradition that emphasized timing, improvisation, and physicality, core strengths he had honed during his stand-up and television years. After Good Times concluded in 1979, Walker faced the familiar challenge of transitioning from a character as iconic as J.J. Evans to other roles that could sustain his career. The 1980s presented both opportunities and obstacles. He continued working steadily in television and film, but replicating the cultural resonance of Good Times proved difficult. Walker starred in series such as At Ease, 1983, a short-lived military-themed sitcom, and Bustin' Loose, 1987 to 1988, an adaptation of the 1981 Richard Pryor film. These projects showcased his continued commitment to acting and his ability to lead a series, but both failed to capture the critical acclaim, audience loyalty, or iconic status that had accompanied his work on Good Times. Part of the challenge lay in the typecasting inherent in his early success. Audiences strongly associated Walker with J.J. Evans, and casting directors often envisioned him in similar high-energy comedic roles. While this association ensured that he retained visibility, it also limited the range of opportunities available to him. Projects that deviated from the formula were either scarce or commercially unsuccessful, creating a cycle in which Walker's undeniable talent could not always find an ideal outlet. Despite these limitations, he remained a consistent presence in entertainment, appearing in guest spots, made-for-television movies, and smaller comedic features. Each role contributed to his professional repertoire and kept him in the public eye, even if none matched the revolutionary impact of his earlier work. Following the end of Good Times in 1979, Jimmie Walker Jr. confronted a challenge familiar to many actors whose fame is tied to a single iconic role: typecasting. For Walker, the public and industry alike had come to equate him almost entirely with James J.J. Evans Jr., the exuberant, catchphrase-spouting teenager whose energy and charisma had made him a cultural phenomenon. While this association secured his place in television history, it also created a professional constraint. Casting directors often struggled to envision Walker outside the confines of J.J.'s distinct persona, and audiences frequently expected the same high-energy humor that had defined his television debut. As a result, roles that could have allowed him to demonstrate his broader acting range were limited, and opportunities in dramatic or non-comedic projects were particularly scarce. The 1980s and 1990s marked a period of slower mainstream visibility for Walker, as he navigated the delicate balance between sustaining his career and avoiding the repetitive use of the J.J. archetype. His presence on television declined during these decades. Series attempts such as At Ease, 1983, and Bustin' Loose, 1987 to 1988, failed to recapture the audience fervor of Good Times. While these projects offered Walker leading roles and creative opportunities, they struggled commercially, and Walker found himself increasingly confined to roles reminiscent of his 1970s breakthrough. The pattern was familiar in Hollywood. The very qualities that had made him beloved, expressive physicality, comedic timing, and a vibrant personality, also limited the perception of his range in an industry often reluctant to embrace actors in radically different contexts. Recognizing the constraints imposed by typecasting, Walker adapted by returning to the medium where he had first developed his craft: stand-up comedy. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, he embarked on nationwide comedy tours, performing in clubs, theaters, and special events. His routines leaned on the familiar, high-energy persona audiences loved, blending anecdotes from his career with observational humor about life, fame, and popular culture. Stand-up offered a dual benefit. It provided him with creative control over his material and allowed him to maintain a direct connection with audiences, unfiltered by television or film production constraints. This period also reinforced his reputation as a seasoned performer, capable of sustaining engagement purely through wit, timing, and stage presence. In addition to live comedy, Walker diversified his work with radio hosting and frequent game show appearances. Stations such as WHIO in Dayton, WOAI in San Antonio, and WLS in Chicago featured him as a personality, where his experience with radio from earlier in his career proved invaluable. Hosting segments on these stations allowed him to remain professionally active, cultivate a new audience, and leverage his natural communication skills in a medium that demanded both charisma and conversational agility. Game shows, guest appearances, and interviews further supplemented his visibility, though none offered the sustained exposure or cultural impact of his Good Times years. Despite decades of dedication to entertainment, Walker's later work largely occurred outside the mainstream spotlight. He remained a respected and skilled performer, yet the era of national prominence that had accompanied the J.J. Evans phenomenon was difficult to replicate. The shift underscores the precarious nature of fame in Hollywood, where an actor's breakout success can simultaneously create enduring recognition and a typecasting trap. Walker's experience reflects the tension between maintaining audience expectations and pursuing artistic growth, a challenge many performers encounter after defining early success. In 2012, decades after the peak of his fame, Jimmie Walker Jr. offered the world a deeply personal and revealing look into his life and career with the publication of his memoir, Din O' Might, Good Times, Bad Times, Our Times, a Memoir. The book marked a pivotal moment in Walker's journey, allowing him to step beyond the caricature of J.J. Evans and speak candidly about the man behind the iconic catchphrase. Far more than a mere recounting of career milestones, the memoir provided insight into the pressures, compromises, and misunderstandings that shaped both his professional trajectory and personal growth. From the outset, Walker made it clear that fame, while exhilarating, carried complex consequences. The memoir delves into the paradox that had defined his career. The very qualities that propelled him to stardom, his infectious energy, physical comedy, and the unforgettable Din O' Might, also pigeonholed him in the public imagination. Casting directors and audiences alike came to expect JJ's exuberance in every performance, leaving Walker struggling to assert his range and explore roles that departed from the archetype. In detailing these challenges, Walker highlights the emotional toll of typecasting, a reality familiar to many performers who achieve early, defining success. He discusses how opportunities for diverse roles were limited, and how repeated association with a single persona could feel both validating and constraining, a duality that shaped his professional choices throughout the 1980s and beyond. Beyond career constraints, the memoir is notable for its honesty about the personal pressures of life in the public eye. Walker recounts the challenges of navigating sudden fame as a young man in his 20s, the expectations of fans, and the scrutiny of industry insiders. He reflects on the tension that arose between his public persona and private identity, explaining how the persona of J.J. Evans often overshadowed his own voice. These insights reveal a performer deeply aware of the dissonance between perception and reality, a man who had to negotiate the fine line between audience expectations and personal authenticity. Walker also addresses the often overlooked behind-the-scenes conflicts that defined his early career. He recounts the creative disagreements with co-stars and production teams on Good Times, detailing the friction with John Amos and Esther Rolle over the show's shifting focus toward his character. While some media narratives cast him as the source of tension, Walker's memoir provides nuance, emphasizing that the conflicts arose from a clash of priorities. His rising popularity contrasted with the desire of his colleagues to maintain the show's original social and familial mission. By sharing these stories candidly, he illuminates the complex dynamics of collaborative creativity, revealing both the triumphs and struggles inherent in working within a high-profile ensemble. A central theme of Din O' Might is resilience. Walker reflects on how he adapted to the vicissitudes of an entertainment career, from typecasting and reduced visibility to the necessity of diversifying through stand-up comedy, radio hosting, and guest appearances. He offers anecdotes from touring the country with his stand-up routines, providing humor and insight while showcasing his enduring ability to connect with audiences outside the confines of television. These reflections underscore his determination to remain professionally active, even when mainstream recognition waned, and highlight the practical and emotional strategies he employed to sustain a long-term career. Despite decades in the public eye, Jimmie Walker Jr. has maintained a remarkably private personal life, a deliberate choice that sets him apart from many of his contemporaries in Hollywood. Unlike the larger-than-life persona of James J.J. Evans Jr., Walker has largely kept his personal affairs out of tabloid headlines, preferring to let his work define his public image. Over the course of his career, he has remained unmarried and has no children, a fact that often surprised fans and occasionally fueled speculation. Rumors about romantic relationships and personal entanglements circulated periodically, yet Walker consistently refuted or sidestepped them, demonstrating a conscious effort to shield his private world from the glare of fame. In interviews and public appearances, he has emphasized that his focus has always been on his career, personal growth, and the pursuit of meaningful creative work rather than conforming to societal or industry expectations regarding family life. Walker's privacy is not only a reflection of personal preference, but also a strategy for maintaining control over his narrative. Having experienced the pressures of typecasting, media scrutiny, and the intense public attention following his role on Good Times, he became acutely aware of the ways in which celebrity can complicate personal life. By keeping relationships, finances, and family matters out of the spotlight, Walker has preserved a degree of autonomy rarely afforded to performers of his era. This approach contrasts sharply with the lives of many of his peers, whose personal choices were often heavily scrutinized, sensationalized, or politicized by the media. Walker's discretion reflects a measured understanding of fame. He recognizes that visibility does not necessitate exposure, and that boundaries between public persona and private identity are essential for personal well-being. In addition to his private personal life, Walker has openly expressed his political viewpoints in recent years, a development that has sparked discussion and occasional controversy. Identifying as a realist independent, he has supported some positions commonly associated with conservatism, including viewpoints on taxation, government policy, and personal responsibility. These positions occasionally contrasted with the expectations of fans who had come to associate him with 1970s African-American comedic culture, which was widely perceived as politically liberal or socially progressive. Walker's willingness to articulate independent political beliefs demonstrates his commitment to personal authenticity, even when doing so risks alienating segments of his audience or provoking debate within the entertainment community. Walker has approached these political expressions thoughtfully, emphasizing pragmatism over ideology. He has described himself as someone who evaluates issues individually rather than adhering rigidly to partisan platforms, reflecting a worldview shaped by decades of observing social change, navigating Hollywood dynamics, and living through the shifting cultural landscapes of America.